Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 21 of the Palmcast. We have a very special guest here today. Before we jump into that, Teddy, how are you? Can you get us started?
I'm great. Great to see you as always, Tom. Rob, thanks for being on. Really appreciate that. Today's episode of the Palmcast is proudly sponsored by Nelson Plant Food. For over 30 years, Nelson has been providing high quality fertilizers trusted by growers, landscapers, and gardeners alike. Whether you're planting palms, growing from seed, or maintaining established landscapes, Nelson Plant Food delivers the nutrients your plants need to thrive. Visit nelsonplantfood.com to learn more and support the companies that support the palm community. Man, on that note with Nelson, I'm out. I need to get more fertilizer too. I need to get a hold of Dest in there and see what if we can get some coming.
Agreed. I'm absolutely out as well. So, what's new, Teddy?
What is new? We've finally got summer temps here in Tennessee. Like not like we haven't had them. I think in March we hit 90 degrees already, and then we went back to like winter for a little bit. Then we had a really long spring, an actual spring for once. And now we're highs in the 90s and lows in the 70s, and all the plants are growing like a dang tropical rainforest here right now.
Yeah. I made a comment in our chat yesterday that I feel like it's almost not even as an observation of Sables at least. I feel like it's less about the water than it is about the heat. Obviously, you have to have water, but I feel like now that it's really cranking here in North Texas, it's warm, man. I think we pretty briefly hit 100 degrees the other day, which
Hmm.
actually it should be hotter by now. I'm not going to complain, but we're like in the 90s, upper 90s every single day. Overnights are 80, 81 degrees. I feel like I'm seeing so much growth on things. It's like the stuff that's in my pots, the bigger stuff, the 5 gallon, 10 gallon, 15 gallon, plus the stuff that's in ground. I feel like it's just leaps and bounds. Things are starting to go fast. So I'm pretty excited about that. The only other update I have is I am one step away from having water at my ranch.
Finally.
I have a water meter at the road, boys. I know.
Amazing. It only took what, a year? Real couple years?
It took a while, and now I got to figure out how to. Well, I know how to, but I have to get the water from the water meter to my cabin where everything is 2,000 feet into my property. So it's a lot of PVC. But anyways, it's a it's a positive thing. As you know, Rob, water is pretty important to growing things. If you don't have water, you're not doing much.
My water bill is incredibly high during the summer for these roses and pots. Not so much the ground, but the pots have to be watered every day. They transpire a lot.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I
Rob,
thought. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, I was gonna have Rob introduce himself because we're already getting into the conversation, and it's been great getting all these guests from all across the country. Last week we had Jeff Anderson on out of New Mexico, and Rob is not far from me, but you're in Louisiana. So tell us a little bit about you, Rob.
Well, I've lived my whole life in Red River Parish, Louisiana, smack dab in between almost Shreveport and Natchitoches. Natchitoches is a very historical city and town, and I've always lived out here in the country, never been in the city. I don't think I could really live in the city, but out here in the country, I grew up in a farming community that went from farming community to a cattle community into a labale pine plantation community. Used to be a lot of hay too, but that's all switched over to pine trees. And I've been gardening all my life. My grandparents introduced me into gardening, especially my grandmother, and I've liked plants ever since I was probably 5 years old. Some of my gardening people that inspired me very much was Alan Lacey and Roger Swain. There were some really awesome authors and really good gardeners.
And speaking about heat, I saw some temperatures in Louisiana. Is it right you've been over 100 degrees already?
I have been over 100 degrees back in May and April. I had one day coming down the highway in Natchitoches where I work. It was 100 degrees on my car thermometer, and the humidity index was like 101 115 or something. So the humidity has been really bad here. It's terribly humid. I'll take the low 90s, mid 90s. I can survive that. But when the heat index is 115, that's not fun.
Oh man. And you've had a lot of rain too, right?
I've had probably in the month of June about 14 inches at my house.
Yeah. We speaking of Jeff Anderson, our guest last week. He said he
Yeah.
got 4 inches for the year last year.
The worst drought I ever seen was 2011. I don't think between that whole year I got 12 inches of rain here. I think the whole year was about maybe 12. It was so dry. I was planting a watermelon crop, and the seeds were uncovered from the dust before I reached the end of the row with the first planting. The ground was just pure dust. Before my soaker hoses got a chance to wet it down, that was dry.
Hmm.
We have a lot to go over today because you piqued my interest yesterday about your love of watermelon and your care of heirloom varieties of things. So let's get into it, right? So what do you want to start, Rob? On roses, on watermelon, on air like
Let's let's do the heirloom. Just first off, I'll give you a talk about the heirlooms, then we'll go to say the roses and say watermelons for last because watermelons is kind of like my pet subject. What I started out with in heirlooms way back in 1990 when I first joined Cemeteries Exchange. After I figured out everything that I grew up with in the 80s and or late 70s and 80s was going away. That was very scary to realize how much stuff was disappearing overnight. But the main reason I do heirloom plants and heirloom varieties is because two reasons. They deserve to be preserved and they are tough as nails for the most part. I have daily clumps of these older dailies you can dig up and throw on top of the ground and walk off and forget about, and they'll just root into the ground and pull themselves into the ground and grow. These newer dailies that they hybridize and sell for $100 for two fans, you dig them up and you don't plant them right away, they'll die. And the same thing with modern hybrid tea roses. Well, that actually goes back into the hybrid tea rose in general, but modern hybrid tea roses require to be drenched in chemicals to survive here in the South. Now, drier climates, less humid climates, they do a lot better. And most modern plants have to have intensive care to survive in landscapes. These older ones, I have a strain of hydrangea that is not it come from an old house site that had been abandoned for 25 years and survived the 2011 drought. The modern hydrangeas, if you plant them and get them established and withhold water, they die, and it's quite brutal. That's my take on heirlooms. They're tough, they're pretty, and they deserve to be preserved to protect their genetics because you can breed heirloom to heirloom and still get tough and pretty plants without all these heavily inbred lines like modern daylilies, for example.
Hmm.
so in my mind, I'm thinking, is heirloom any much akin to like native plants or
There are some selections of native plants that people pass around as heirlooms in my area. You see, Amsonia ludoviciana, the Louisiana blue star, is the most common native plant that I see, perennial that I see planted at old house sites. It's no longer grown like it was when I was a little kid. Every yard had Louisiana blue star in it. People wouldn't believe that, but it was true. Instead of the modern day one they sell now called Amsonia tabernae montana, which is the common blue star, which sold every nursery that carries native plants, which it's not native to Louisiana, but it's a nice one. But that's my experience is sometimes you can find old selections of native plants that are heirlooms. Yes, definitely.
So I mean, I'm fairly familiar with like heirloom tomato varieties, right? That's what most people would hear about those.
yeah.
But and we can talk about that too. But um, since you've got some experience here, because I really don't, and I'm asking honestly, selfishly here, how did we go from people planting and having heirloom varieties, or even big growers, seed suppliers? Why did we get away from heirloom and now we're in these modern plants, like you said?
Two issues: disease and productivity. That's the two main issues. You can like the watermelons, like I was telling y'all yesterday, watermelons went through three distinct ages of cultivation in the South. You had your golden age melons of the giant the 1830s all the way up into the 1930s, almost 100 years of humongous watermelons that were grown in big fields over. They planted them in the same field over and over and over. And then somehow a fungus named Fusarium was introduced into these growing fields, and it rapidly spread from around 1910 until the 30s. To these fields wouldn't even a plant wouldn't even survive in these fields. You could plant a 50-acre watermelon field, and none would survive.
Hmm.
So seed companies weren't really the major drive. Most watermelons introduced during the golden age were people bred their own watermelons, accidentally crossed because they didn't really understand. They understand you had to plant them in certain distance, separation, certain distance for purity because watermelons cross. They're outcrossers. They have male and female flowers. They must be pollinated by bees to successfully produce seed. So they're definitely outcrossers, and they will cross like crazy. So some of these watermelons that arose in the South during that time period were accidental and some were intentional. But most seed growers would and farmers would plant one kind of watermelon a year and rotate. I don't like if you grew three kinds of watermelons on your farm, you'd plant one year, one the next, and one the next. And some adventurous people in these plantations and these big farms would plant several and see if they could cross and get something new. That's how Odell's White was introduced. They crossed an African melon with a Mediterranean melon, and it produced this big, beautiful, round, gray watermelon with fine green netting called Odell's White with pink flesh. It was the first of the giant southern watermelons, averaged 50, 60, 70 pounds. They were packed onto barges and shipped down the river to Charleston, South
50
Carolina.
pounds?
Easy. That was big.
What?
Back in the day, the watermelons averaged small, basketball size. So these giant watermelons became
Oh,
known from the South, and they were shipped down to Charleston via barges and put on ships in Charleston and sailed up to New York and sold. They became extremely popular in northern markets in the mid to late summer. And then another famous one was Ravenscroft. That arose in a plantation called Ravenscroft Plantation. Then the rattlesnake melon, which arose on the South Carolina, Georgia border. And back then they could get 3 feet long and a foot or so across or more. And those watermelons were stacked into barges and shipped all over the East Coast. And then the watermelons got so popular that they would plant them in Bermuda and ship them to New York and the coasts in Christmas time. So
Hmm.
that was the origin of the big watermelons. And then the fields got so bad toward the 1920s and 30s that they couldn't grow anything. That they were just these beautiful, delicious old varieties just would not survive. So several seed companies, but mostly land grant universities like LSU and the University of Florida, and several USD experiment stations began to breed watermelons. They imported some African varieties that showed significant resistance to Fusarium and several Australian varieties. The Australian variety Hawkesbury was used in breeding most of the Silver Age melons. It is extremely resistant to Fusarium. You could plant straight Hawkesbury in a Fusarium infected field and get about 75 to 80% survival rate, which is quite high for that disease in an infected field. And so they began to use that to breed, especially University of Florida at Leesburg. They turned out the Lee series of watermelons. Most are extinct now, except for Dixie Lee and Jubilee, which Jubilee is probably one of the most well-known watermelons in this country. But it is degraded. Back in the day, they would save seeds. They have seed fields, like a 40-acre field for seeds, and they'd only save seeds out of the biggest, best melons in the field. But now they save seeds out of whatever in the field, be a tiny little small deformed melon or a giant melon. So you don't have the uniformity that you used to have in the seed industry. But with the Lee series, there were Brown Lee, Black Lee, Smoky Lee, Minnie Lee, Mickey Lee, Sugar Lee, Dixie Lee, Jubilee, Sweet Lee. All those Lee series watermelons came out of the University of Florida, but most of them came out at a terrible time in the late 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when this hybrids began to appear and displace all these old diploids. See, old watermelons that were from the golden age and the silver age of watermelons were mostly diploids. They had two sets of chromosomes, and they were not hybrids. Most hybrids are tetraploid. So they begin to breed these tetraploid hybrids. And from these tetraploids, you got the modern watermelons you see in Walmart and what they sell on the side of the roads and trucks now. They're all based on a watermelon called All Sweet, which was bred. I forgot who bred All Sweet. But All Sweet, I think it came out of the university of one of the Kansas universities, and then another watermelon called Cal Sweet, which was bred in California. Those rind patterns replaced. They loved the rind pattern, that dark green with a very faint light green stripe. That became the go-to rind pattern, and I'd say about 95% of all modern watermelons grown in the United States have the all sweet, Cal sweet, rind, excuse me, rind pattern and little bitty tiny seeds. But from those hybrids, they develop triploids. That's where your seedless watermelons come from. But that's a dead end cross. To get seedless watermelons, uh, you cross a watermelon, then you take and treat the seeds with colchicine or now a synthetic chemical, and it mutates them into the tetraploids, and then you cross those tetraploids back with a diploid, and you get a triploid mule, which has 3 sets of chromosomes. So they cannot produce viable seeds. So that's where your seedless come from. It's a mutant. That's how seedless come from. Totally genetics. You can do that with a lot of fruits too. That's that's the basic history of where the watermelons disappeared and why all the old ones disappeared. It was all about production, uniformity, and they get ripe real fast and uniform. They taste either if you can pick them at the right time, they're really quite good, but they're not picked at the right time. They're picked all at one time. The whole fields are harvested within maybe 2 harvests of the whole field. So you get a lot of melons that are technically ripe, but they're not ripe. So that's
Is
why
it?
your Walmart melon tastes nasty.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I'm like our family loves watermelon. I've historically loved watermelon. I've seen in the last couple of years, I'm glad you said this. But watermelon just doesn't taste great anymore. It tastes really not, it's either very white and it's just not very sweet. It's very seldom do I get like I remember as a kid there was always those watermelons where like every watermelon, it was hard to find a bad one. But when you opened it up and chopped it up, it was just like sugar. It tasted fantastic. Now they're all very there's a lot of white in them. They're crunchy. They're just not very good. And so that's why.
How they determine to pick the watermelons is not the sign of the plants. They go by a thing called a Brix gun. It
Yeah.
looks like a tattoo gun, and there's a needle in it. They go to these watermelons, they stick it in this in the watermelon, and it sucks juice out, and it runs a sugar levels. If the sugar level is like a 9.1 out of five, they test 10 melons. If they all present 9.1 and 9.5, they harvest the whole field. A true watermelon that you pick when you like real vine ripe watermelon from a home garden or a local truck garden or the old fashioned ones, the Brix was a 12 to a 13.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
that really sweet.
It's hard to
And that's
find it's hard to find a guy out in the suburban area at least who has a truck of watermelons. I do know actually out by East Texas, out by my ranch, I oftentimes see people on the side of the road with just those gigantic long melons, and I'm assuming I should buy some of those.
yes, if you stop there and look at them, roll it over. If the belly's kind of a creamy color, like a creamy old ivory, if you know what how old ivory ages that yellowish color,
Hmm.
yeah. If you can see a watermelon with that on the bottom, and the rind feels kind of not smooth, got little tiny little maybe a few brown dots here and there, and it looks not shiny or glossy. That's a sweet melon. That bottom is an indicator of sugar. And sometimes the sugar will make its way up to the surface of the rind, and you'll get these little teeny tiny brown specks and feel a little rough under your finger. That's a sugar spot. And those are the best kind to pick. Never pick a watermelon that has a bright white belly on it, even though it looks big and pretty. If it's got a really white belly or a light cream belly, it's not going to be sweet. Even but the stores have bred that to trick you. A lot of these watermelons in Walmart have the dark bellies, and they're still not sweet. That's one of the breeders' tricks. Those watermelon breeders are pretty smart.
It sounds like the mafia.
It is all vegetable growing, commercial growing is basically mafia. Yes, it's to
Wow.
I,
pull the. Why do you
it's,
think to modern tomatoes, bulk tomatoes you buy in the store, like softballs or baseballs, hard as a rock, most have very little tomato flavor. They
Yep.
just You think you're eating a tomato, so it fools your mind.
It's fun. I found one thing. Everything you said is so fascinating. Seriously, like I well, we could probably keep this going for about 5 hours with all the information you've got. I can already tell, and all the questions that Tom and I have. But one thing stood out to me. You mentioned we just covered the basics there, and I feel like I got a college level master class
Yeah.
already from you.
Yeah. On
So that
genetics.
opened up like an unreal amount of more questions for me. So Tom, holy crap, we went down a rabbit hole with this episode, didn't we?
I
Um,
I love it.
man, I'm trying to recount here. So the first thing that comes to my mind, without going down a different rabbit hole, which we might here,
I
if
love rabbit
water
holes. Let's go down them all.
if watermelons have changed that much, and we've lost all these different varieties, like you said, now I'm not an expert on this like you are. Um, but I remember hearing like, you know, tomatoes aren't basically what they originally were. You know, it's all breeding to make it what
Yes,
it is now. Same with like, anything you can think of, mustard and chili peppers and carrots, all of it. Like a lot of vegetables, I guess, really they were toxic or unusable in like an edible way, and they had to be bred to make
that's
it
correct.
usable. Is that right?
That's correct. Watermelons were not always sweet. The sweet watermelons didn't really come around until the 1600s. Before that, they taste like cucumbers, and they were used to make refreshing drinks that flavored like cucumber flavored drinks. And in Africa, there was another kind of watermelon called a macatine. It was like a citron style watermelon. It get quite large, and it has been used in a lot of watermelon breeding for disease resistance. But they would cut this watermelon up and they would cook it, deseed it and cook it like meat because it would be firm, like almost like a potato. It was almost like a sort of watery starch, but it's
Huh.
called a macadine. And it was used. The seeds were edible. They would roast the seeds and pound them hulls and all into a edible paste or an oil, and then the flesh was eaten and the rind was fed to their cattle. So that was called the macatine watermelon. The citron watermelon you sometimes see wild around old home sites and cotton fields and cornfields. Not so much now since the age of sprayed agriculture. Before the age of everything being sprayed with herbicides, you'd see all these rogue vegetables growing at these old house sites. Uh, the citron watermelon was used quite popularly up until the 1960s as a source of sweetmeats. They would take these watermelons and cut them, cube them, deseed them, and cook the watermelon flesh. Is white. It tastes bitter, almost bitter, but not quite. Kind of like a medicine flavor taste. They'd cut it up into uniform cubes. My aunt used to do it as well, and simmer it till it was candied. And then they would take that simmered stuff in a syrup. You could add whatever color food color you want to turn it whatever color, and take these little cubes and drain them out and then drop them into sugar and roll them around in fine sugar to get these little cubes. And that's what they would add along with those candied cherries and pineapple to their fruit cakes to make. Up until the 1980s, most of that sweet meat mix in your fruit cakes was pineapple, cherries, and citron watermelon.
Wow. Man, I is so is are you not a fan of seedless watermelon then? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not a fan of them because they deny the experience of eating a watermelon. The seeds are part of the experience, but seedless watermelons are not what destroyed the watermelon. Seedless watermelons are expensive to produce. They're so hard to produce. They're sold by the seed count, not by the ounce or pound. They're sold by the seed, and they're not what really ruined the watermelon. It was the introduction of the mass market hybrids. They're very disease resistant. They produce lots of melons, but and they're very shippable, but they flavor lacks. They say, oh, they're wonderful like sangria. Most watermelons in the store is descended from the watermelon sangria, and it's not bad if you grow them at home. These hybrids at home and plant them at home, and you raise them at home and let them get right they're supposed to be. They're actually quite sweet, decent melons with little bitty seeds. If you swallow it, it's all right. But you're not raising them at home. You raise them on a big field, and these people just pick chunk, pick chunk, pick chunk, pick chunk. You have so many watermelons you got to pick a day, and they're not thumping them or rolling them over and checking. They just picking them off the vine and tossing them to the workers in the wagon. My uncle next door to where I live now used to have a 50-acre watermelon farm back when I was a little bitty boy. About from the time I was 3 years old, he quit farming them when I was 8. But they would pick for about a month almost. They'd pick over that field for a month. He'd have about 10 different kinds of watermelons planted on those 40 acres. They'd pick every day or two they'd go out there and pick a truckload. He'd have them stacked up like firewood stacked between pine trees like firewood. And these truck sellers would come there and buy a truckload of watermelons, or sometimes a big store would come there and with an 18-wheeler and they'd stack them in crates and put them on an 18-wheeler. He grew stuff like Black Diamond, Desert King, Jubilee, Charleston Gray, uh, Crimson Sweet, Sugar Baby, uh, just uh, like Mountain Sweet, stuff like that. He grew all these old ones
Let
and
me ask you
stuff
a
in the
question,
store.
Rob. Just a general question. I guess for me, when I think of heirloom anything, whether it be tomatoes or whatever, even now watermelon, you always get this idea of, you know, inferior or grown at home or old genetics, history, and then you're always told that if we hybridize things, we hybridize to obviously go get the best genetics out of disease resistance and everything else. And you're always led to believe, I'll entertain your conspiracy theory rat hole side of you, but you're always told to believe that like if you hybridize things, we can take what was once good, but not good all the time or mass producible, and we can make it good and make it mass producible, and then we don't need the heirlooms anymore. And it's funny because the older I get, I think the more I realize that I don't want the hybrid of anything. I want to try to do heirloom of everything. Because I mean, to your point, it makes no sense that you think that you can go and harvest 20, 30 acres of watermelon and get them to all be, or even a good chunk to be the same quality, right? I mean, you think of people who vegetable garden, it's not like you walk outside and pick all your tomatoes once every 2 weeks. You go outside every day, you're looking at things, and you pick the best ones, and you probably are harvesting for weeks at a time.
Correct. The tomatoes, for example, modern tomato farming is not people going down the rows picking tomatoes and putting them in baskets and shipping them back. The tomato, that's a perfect example. Modern tomatoes, they harvest the entire plant. All the tomatoes on these modern ones that are machine harvested, they the plant is bred to stand a certain amount of tomatoes, not bred for quality. It's bred to be firm, turn red, and ripen all at one time. And this machine comes through and cuts the plants off and shakes the whole plants up this conveyor belt and shakes them. These tomatoes are so firm that they fall off and they're not bruised, damaged, or injured into these big bins, and the tomato plants are spit out the back. And then they are plowed under, and another crop of tomatoes or something else is planted in their place. You have like I think it's like an 80-day rotation on those hybrids like that. So every 80 days in South Florida, you plant a crop and then you get a harvest, plant a crop. That's what they're bred for now. If you grow heirlooms or older hybrids, so don't get me wrong, some of the hybrid tomatoes are quite good if they're grown at home, like Celebrity and the old MH series tomatoes hybrids. They're actually quite well. They have a good disease package and they're stable and they're good tomatoes. But you have to they're not commercial tomatoes. That you go out there and you pick one
Yeah.
ripe a day, maybe 4 or 5 days later for another one gets ripe or a week. That's not what the commercial wants.
Yeah.
If you say you're a road stand farmer growing heirloom tomatoes, to get a good crop of tomatoes to sell, you either have to plant a lot of heirlooms, a lot of older fashioned hybrids, or you have to plant these new super modern ones that get ripe all at one time to fill up your stand. So say you need a quarter acre of these new super modern ones that don't taste particularly well. They look pretty and got a good disease package and they ripen in uniform. You need a quarter acre of them to get supply all your tomatoes for your stand. But if you to plant an heirloom or a modern or an older hybrid, you have to plant a whole acre. That's the that's the economics toward that.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? The heirlooms are not as productive, but they're a superior in flavor. The main weakness of heirlooms is their disease package and their productivity. That's the only downsides to an heirloom plant in a vegetable garden. That's the only downsides is disease package and productivity. Because a lot of times they're not productive as the hybrids are.
Of
But
course.
tomatoes can have heirloom tomatoes can load up quite heavily. Heirloom watermelons, I'd say heirloom watermelons are about 70% to 80% as productive as modern hybrids. And so that's not a very bad. Tomatoes the same way. Mostly when you get into stuff like beans and stuff like that, you get a little bit less production, like 50%. And some of the heirloom squashes don't produce as many. They produce far fewer female flowers than these modern hybrids have been bred to produce more female flowers. So that's it. Its main thing is disease and productivity that limits heirlooms. It's not they have good quality, good flavor, and it's just and these wasn't around when they were introduced, or they weren't common. A lot of time, a disease pressure will appear when some plant begins to be grown a whole lot instead of just here and there. When you plant like these watermelon farmers did in the whole entire history of the golden age of watermelons. You just find a good field that grows watermelons well, you plant it and fertilize it every year the same. And that disease spores, you may have one plant or two that had fusarium wilt, and they produce spores when they're plowed under. It spreads a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, to eventually your whole field is covered in fusarium. And the fallow period for fusarium spores in the soil is 32 years. So if you don't grow fusarium resistant watermelons in that field,
Wow.
you have to wait 32 years to grow, you know, more watermelons. That's what happened to the watermelon farming community of Saline, Louisiana. They were well known for their watermelons. There was more watermelons grown there than anywhere else in the Gulf South, except out of a couple of places in Georgia and Alabama beat them. But as far as Louisiana and Mississippi, that was the Saline, Louisiana was the capital of watermelons. They had a huge watermelon festival in the town. Thousands of people would show up. You had over 150 growers. Now there are zero growers, and all the watermelon fields are planted in pine trees because of the fusarium built up. It built up to a point that even the resistant fusarium resistant varieties like Jubilee and Charleston Gray, and even this could not be grown there. So
Hmm.
they just they just basically played the soil till they couldn't play it no more.
Wow. It reminds me a lot about, well, I mean, I'm drawing a parallel here, Teddy, kind of about how you and I are always on the lookout for seeds. And I always feel like, as you tell your story, Rob, of before the days of mass spraying, you would have all sorts of random things popping up all over the place. Now we kill everything, right? And so
Yeah.
I know in our line of business, I know I draw the parallel of, you know, Teddy was on vacation in Florida, I was in Alabama, and we're looking, and he's sending me pictures of a random palmetto that, oh, this one is of a certain size or it looks this way. Like we're always on the hunt for things that are off the beaten path, and that's where I think you find the genetics, right? Because I think a lot of what you're doing and talking about is A, the history, and B, the genetics. Like I'm always very, very big on, I almost feel like the best place to find an heirloom watermelon is probably somewhere in the middle of Louisiana with no neighbors around you, some old plantation house that's been there since the early 1800s. I envision pulling up and just seeing watermelon everywhere.
I actually experienced that in the early 90s. I got my driver's license when I was 15 years old in 1992. And my first thing to do when I was 15 years old, with my driver's license fresh in my pocket, was go down to these very rural areas of Natchitoches Parish, down south part around these old plantation areas, and drive around the back roads. I collected probably 15 or 20 types of watermelons. I never ever identified the varieties. Because back then, this is before the internet, and I had limited research. And I clicked these people, give me watermelons. It was fast. And I do interviews. I had one of these little micro cassette recorders, and I would record the interviews with these people on their front porches mostly, or drink a cup of coffee with them because I was fascinated why a 15-year-old kid was driving around their neighborhoods asking about watermelons. And I came away with all these wonderful watermelons, and I write down notes. And I found not just watermelons, I found rare eggplants and tomatoes and squashes and pumpkins. I had quite a huge seed collection built up before the fire destroyed everything. It was quite a huge collection of Louisiana rural heirlooms, and it was It was awesome. I found that one thing, for example, one of these watermelons was a long, dark green watermelon, quite large, probably 60 pounds. I barely was able to put it in my front seat of my truck and put a seatbelt on it so it didn't fall off the seat. And I got home and I cut it. It was a beautiful sunshine yellow, which that's not a common color in these older watermelons. They more of a muted yellow or a pale orangey yellow or an orange. And if you're gonna get a yellow watermelon, it's never really true yellow. This was true yellow, sunshine yellow, and it had big black seeds and a very thick rind, which showed it was an old watermelon. To this day, I can never match it to anything in none of the historical records or any of the to any of the things. So I'm wondering if it was just a watermelon that somebody accidentally hybridized and they stabilize it. Because if you accidentally hybridize a melon and you plant it over and over and over again and pick out the best ones that you like the best, you'll eventually stabilize the variety. Take about 5 years or 6 years of planting that hybrid over and over again. You will eventually get something stable that will come true from seed. I grew it out one time and it came true from seed. And except for one plant had the moon and stars gene mixed in with it. I rogued that out quickly because I didn't want that in there. But it was a good watermelon. It was quite productive. It was not so tolerant to a disease called anthracnose, which that's a bad watermelon disease too, but it's not as bad as fusarium. It doesn't kill the whole plant. It just starts late, halfway through the life of the plant and works its way down from the crown to the ends of the runners and kills the leaves off. But you get your watermelons tend to harvest them before that kills them. But that's one of my finds. One of my finds. I found about 13, maybe 14 different watermelons like that. But I found a melon called a quill melon that I found a newspaper article with just a few years ago from Georgia. That melon ended up in Louisiana all the way from Georgia. It was like a banana melon on steroids, banana cantaloupe on steroids. It was a huge melon, pointy on both ends, about 2.5, 3 feet long. And it smelled wonderful. In fact, it was so strong, my grandma wouldn't let me put the ripe ones in the house because the whole house turned into a cantaloupe smell. Had to keep them under the carport. But I wish I wish I sent those seeds. I did send some to Seed Savers Exchange, but that's a whole different ballgame. I don't want to get into that right now. That was a bad thing. But but I sent them out to different people during the Seed Savers Exchange, and none of these people kept them pure or kept them going. And so when that fire destroyed my stuff, all that was lost because it the neighbors set a brush pile on fire, and the pasture behind my house was nothing but little blue stem, and a broom sedge, and it roared across and set my portable building on fire while I was at work and incinerated my portable building where I had my deep freezes and all my records and all my files and tape recorder. It burned it all to ashes.
Oh gosh.
It cooked everything in the deep freeze. It burned it so hot that all the jars in the deep freeze exploded, full of seeds, exploded and cooked. So I lost the entire collection.
Oh my
But
gosh.
it's the details are still up here, but they can never be recovered because all these people are old and dead now. The people I got the watermelons from, I went back looking for that neighborhoods and it was all gone. All these people had passed on. These people I got the seeds from are in their 80s, 70s, and 90s, back in the early 1990s.
It's terrible. I remember you saying that yesterday, and I felt horrible hearing you say that, and I feel worse now, because I know what kind of work and the passion that you put into it. So I've got, again, this is like leading to so many questions. I'm trying to remember all of them, but on this note, uh, I like funky fruits. I like to go to like today. I just went grocery shopping before this, and I got a Tuscan cantaloupe. Whether it's worth a crap, I don't know, but I'm gonna try it. And I like to get different varieties like that. It's just me. We like to experiment and try different stuff at my house. Where can you get all these heirloom varieties these days? Is anybody doing it
Yeah.
still?
You have to Google search if you want the best source of heirloom watermelons right now. And he's hard to order from because you have to print off the order form off the computer, write it down, and send it to him. Is Sand Hill Preservation Center, and he's up in Iowa, named Glenn Drowns. He has probably the largest collection of heirloom watermelons for sale in the country. You can get a lot from uh, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, Victory Seeds, and places like that. So True Seeds, Mary's Heirlooms. They carry one or two or three heirloom varieties. If you're going to grow heirloom watermelon, it's not too late right now to plant you some in your garden from seed. They'll come up and grow and make before the frost. Is Orange Glow. that would be my number one best watermelon. I love it more than any other watermelon out there. It's not ancient. It's from the 1960s. It's it's a beautiful hybrid. It's the color of orange juice on the inside. It is so sweet, and it has a beautiful rind. It gets between 10 to 45 pounds, and it is worth finding and growing. It's an old Wilhite variety. Coffee Seeds Company became one of the greatest watermelon breeders in the entire country. It was Dr. Coffee ran it. He sold his seeds through Wilhite Seed Company, famous Texas seed company. It's not the one that's Wilhite now is not the same. They still sell heirloom watermelons, but it went bankrupt and was acquired and rebranded. So it's
Hmm.
that's not the same company. But back in the day, they would have a seed catalog with nothing but watermelons in it. Nothing. You'd have,
Unbelievable.
I got some of those seed catalogs from the 30s and 40s and 50s because I have a huge seed catalog collection dating back to 1900. And those Wilhites are extremely rare. I only have three of them. And that coffee seed company introduced so many selections and so many. They scoured the South for sports of famous old varieties like Tom Watson. That's a good watermelon. It requires a long season. You have to plant that in the early spring, but you'll get 70, 80 pound melons if you baby them and fertilize them correctly and keep them in the right water. But they found a couple of watermelons in a field that had mutated with a what they call the icing pattern watermelon rind. Looks like you took a paintbrush and little bits of gray green all over the watermelon, little random splashes. That's called the icing pattern. I can't remember the exact what the USDA plant breeders assigned it to it, but it's a beautiful watermelon. They sold it as spotted Watson for years and years, and Glenn Drown still has it. But he sells it under a different name, or just spotted, or just spot, and it's a good watermelon. It's viewed the rind as something you've never seen before. It looks like a painting.
Hmm.
But research Coffee Seed Company, and Wilhite, the old classic Wilhite, that'll knock your socks off for that diversity that one company had before it collapsed around, I'd say 1999 when its last good year.
So to tie in palm trees, because we are the Palmcast, there's in the news a few years ago. I don't know if you heard about this, Tom, or if you did, Rob, but they were doing some archaeological dig somewhere in the Middle East, and they uncovered all these
Oh,
clay jars, and
yes.
they had date palm seeds that were like 1,000 years old of like a lost variety,
Yeah,
and they
Medusa.
got
It's
and yeah, and they
Medusa.
got it
Yeah.
to actually germinate, and
It was,
so that's really cool that they brought that back, and that's making me think here over all the wars that have happened and landscape changes since humans have started cultivating vegetables. I wonder how many varieties of stuff just been lost, and it's just you couldn't even get it again.
Lots. All the cotton varieties that were grown in the South pre-Civil War are all gone. They fell out of favor during the war and during the age of the boll weevil. And a lot of tomato varieties. Livingston, you'll research Livingston's tomatoes. That's all. Most of his varieties are lost, but so much is lost from war, neglect, uh, and stuff like that. It's just unreal.
Well,
And
I think the other problem I think the other problem honestly is everybody, the backyard grower, when they're growing something, the average backyard grower, I'm not going to say us on this episode. I think we're all strange people, and all the listeners are probably also strange people. But your backyard person wants of whatever they're growing to be perfect, right? Like
yeah,
how many people go in their garden, they pick something, and they're like, oh, this has a brown spot on it. I'm not going to eat this. Or this has like this has an imperfection here. And I always find that to be odd because you obviously aren't very much in the hobby if you think that that's a realistic thing to just be able to crank out a perfect thing every time. Not only is it not realistic, but it also, I mean, it's a plant and it's out in the environment. Things are going to be different based on the whatever. And it's just a very strange thought process to always have to have perfection. So the point of my comment is I think because of that, oftentimes that's where you get the hybrids, right? Like oftentimes in plants, when you have your heirloom varieties or your older non-hybrid ones, they're less showy,
yeah.
right? And
Less uniform and less perfection. Yes.
correct. Yes. There's a lot more imperfections. And breeders are like, we don't want that. People don't want that. So now we've bred people to always expect perfection. And then it's sad because, yeah, there's so many things, Teddy. That's 100% right. How much have we lost that we're never going to get back? And also, the interesting thing is, I'm going to take the optimistic side of that. How much is out there that we just haven't actually been able to find yet?
In the vegetable stuff in the U.S., I think the most heirlooms out there have been rediscovered. There was a heavy movement in the 90s and early 2000s on this, and the tomato, especially the tomato network, that has just was phenomenal. I collect these books called it was done by Seed Savers Exchange when they were still the Seed Savers Exchange. They put out something called the Garden Seed Inventory. A series of books was put out every so many years where Seed Savers would order every seed catalog available in America and list all the non-hybrid seeds per type of vegetable, like all the beans, certain snap beans, shell beans, red tomatoes, pink tomatoes, purple tomatoes, yellow tomatoes, red tomatoes, whatever. They would list all the non-hybrids. The book was about the tomato section was probably about maybe 30 pages in 1984 when the first issue came out. The last issue that they produced before it collapsed, the sixth edition, there were probably about 80, 90 pages of tomatoes,
Oh my gosh.
of heirloom tomatoes that have been found and introduced. Heirloom tomatoes are they found tons and tons, and especially in Appalachia, up and down the mountains of Appalachia and the valleys to the east and the west. That was these where these big giant beefsteak tomatoes came from. And Appalachia, that is the heirloom capital of tomato and the bean capital, heirloom bean capital too of the country. They found beans. That's another crop because beans and tomatoes they don't outcross very badly. You can grow 10 or 20 kinds of heirloom tomatoes, maybe 30, however many you want to grow. As long as you give them like 10 feet apart, a little block of tomatoes and skip 10, 15 feet, you can plant them down there and you can get, I'd say your odds of getting across would be like 5% or something like that. Same
Can
thing
you
with beans.
Hey Rob, can you explain to me why every single time, and I've seen this, I don't know, way even my kids have said this way more in the last couple years, but why do our tomatoes when we buy them and you open them up, they're already like germinating?
That is a condition called viviparous. I think viviparousy. It's caused by those seeds in the curing position. Basically, whether it's curing those tomatoes, the seeds mature and ripen while they are curing the fruit to sell it. So basically, they're providing the perfect situation for the seeds to germinate inside the fruit. It's not a disease. It's not a genetic issue. I've had it happen in heirloom watermelon. I set a Odell's white watermelon on my back porch for 4 months and forgot about it. Right before Christmas time, I said, I'm going to cut this up and see how horrible it is on the inside. It hadn't froze or anything. I cut it open. It was full of germinated seeds. The inside had turned into nothing but strings and germinated seeds. And I seen it in pumpkins too. It's just the seeds get just the right amount of heat and the right amount of moisture, and they germinate. It's you can look at this viviparousy or vivipar something like that. I cannot remember the exact term for that, but
How
I've seen it in
long
watermelons and pumpkins and squash and tomatoes.
how long can a water I mean, you just made a comment about putting a watermelon on your porch and coming back a quarter later. How long can watermelons sit out?
That is a good question. It depends on the watermelon. If you grow one of there's the old varieties called Winter King, Winter Queen, or Winter or Christmas. You can take those three watermelons and plant them. I'd say in late May, early June, and or late June, and keep them all watered and taken care of. They get to about the size of a basketball, and you pick them when they're ripe and they will keep in good edible condition for up to 6 months. If you store them in a cool place like inside a house, that's regular room temperature, like 75 degrees inside the house out of sunlight, they will keep up to 6 months and still remain perfectly edible. They may not be quite as firm. They might be a little less juicy, but they will be perfectly edible. They're Winter King and Queen, Winter King, Conklin, and Christmas is what they're called, and
Hmm.
they last forever. I mean, I've picked some in middle of October, and we was eating them after New Year's. I stored them in a closet. I put them like in the open top tub, so in case one of them went bad, it wouldn't wet my closet down with stinky watermelon juice. But it was it was really good, and they grow really well. Right now is the time to plant them. You can order them; they're quite common, not as common as they used to be, but that's how people used to store them. They would bury them in sawdust in their barns and pull them out for holiday. Sawdust was like insulation to keep them cool from freezing or being too hot.
Hmm.
And but that yeah, they're definitely long keepers. You can get the average watermelon. No, the average watermelon you got 3 weeks to a month, something like that, before it starts getting all stringy. It will the sugars will convert to starch or something and form these little strings, and it's like chewing on. It's not pleasant, but they won't hurt you or anything. And but the best thing to do is to eat a watermelon within 2 weeks of picking it.
I got a weird note here, whether this goes anywhere or not, but I've thought about it a long time. So one quick thing, like a tomato's a new world plant, right? From the Americas.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks like in Italy, like, oh my gosh, you're gonna get pizza with tomato sauce, or you're gonna have pasta with tomato sauce. So like the noodle came from Asia, I'm pretty sure from
Yes.
China,
Yes.
and then the tomato came from the New World. So like everybody thinks like this is just a stupid thought that I have maybe, but like pizza's like or sauce is like an ancient Italian Mediterranean thing, and I'm just thinking like so people came over from Europe, got tomatoes, and then brought them back, and that's where that started. Is that right?
Yes. Italians were one of the first people to start eating tomatoes. They eat tomatoes a whole lot more than the first people to use them more than any other nation. Most people thought they were poisonous. And the same with chocolate. Chocolate was a New World thing, but they didn't use it the same way. Potatoes too. Potatoes were an Andean crop, and the way they prepared tomato potatoes to use compared to now is more like they dried them. They would take potatoes, dig them up, let them freeze, and then stomp them out of the skin, and just take that mush and stomp on it, and then let it dry. And that was a source of edible, rich. They basically like powdered potatoes.
Hmm.
That's how most potatoes were cooked in the Andean region. Now, they had already reached Central America by the time of European discovery, and they would roast them and not so much dry them. There was a lot of roasting, a lot of dry, and eat them fresh like that. Tomatoes were cooked mostly and chopped up and thrown into soups. And peppers the same way. Peppers were cooked make different moles and different sauces. But Native Americans had quite a cuisine in Central America. Uh, it was quite a cuisine there. But this Italy adapted tomato first, and the Ottoman Turks really loved the peppers, and so did the Chinese. There was no spicy uh, peppers in China until the New World brought over from the New World. Um, so all the Chinese spice was black pepper and white pepper and red pepper, not red pepper like a capsicum, but a little peppercorn red and Szechuan pepper. That was
Hmm.
the only pepper they had in China, and each one operated on a different principle. But then they hot spicy peppers were introduced first to the Philippines, and then they spread from the Philippines to the China because they had a ship line that ran between called the Manila Galleon line that ran from Mexico to the Philippines and back. That Spanish did. So that's how a lot of New World plants were introduced
Hmm.
into Asia. And sometimes the eggplants and Asian plants were introduced into Mexico. There's even a feral melon uh, that grows all across the South that was introduced from to the to North America from that route. Looks like a little. Everybody calls it a lemon cucumber, but it's not. It's a little melon that smells real good. It's a weed that grows on the roadsides and fields.
I
That
have
came
those.
through the.
I have
You
that.
have
They're like small little balls, right?
Yeah, they look like about the egg size, and they smell real good, but they don't taste good. They taste kind of blah. That's
Yeah.
Hmm.
called a melon. It
I
was
just
introduced from Southeast Asia through Mexico and spread its way. The natives spread it up along the Gulf Coast, and yes, that's a really interesting thing.
Interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
I saw those growing in our garden actually. Or yeah, 2 years ago. I was like, what the heck is this?
They're actually kind of cool plants. They smell your car up real good. They make it smell like it smells. They call it Queen Anne's pocket melon. It's a really interesting little plant. And also the only one another plant that's found all across uh the new and old world is bottle gourds. They have no idea where they how they made it to the new world, but and sweet potatoes too. The
Hmm.
Polynesians introduced sweet potatoes across uh the new world way back, way before Columbus. Some Polynesian ships landed on the South American coast, and that's how sweet potatoes got there.
Hmm.
Rob, how many so yesterday you told us that you have 350 varieties of watermelon, heirloom
My,
varieties.
I did have that many
Had,
varieties in my freezer.
had. How many do you
Right
have?
now I got about 12. Right now I got about 30 right now
That's still a
and
lot.
locked in jars.
That's a lot.
Most of these I just planted some day before yesterday from a seed collector I picked up in 2022 from down in South Louisiana. He was a big seed collector. He recently died. He was getting rid of his seed collection. I picked up. He couldn't tell me the description of what they were or what they are. I've never seen. One of them was a small little white seed, very small, and the other one was a black seeded watermelon that was dusty colored and with a dusty powder on it. I've never seen a watermelon like that. So I planted both of them to see if they'll come up. They're still good. I had to put them back in my freezer after I got them from him, and I planted them out on Thursday to see if they'll germinate. It'll be interesting. The greenhouse is quite warm, and the soil is quite warm in the greenhouse, so they germinate pretty fast in this heat. So it'll be interesting if they come up. I'll have to hand pollinate these or take them to a friend's house and plant them out at his house so I can keep them pure. I got several friends that let me grow stuff on around their houses because they don't grow gardens. Keep them pure because I don't like hand pollinating watermelons works, but it's a chore. You have to tape the male and female flowers shut the night before they open, and then go out there that morning. You better carry a pair of tweezers because the male flower stems tend to fall off. And you pick the male flower, and you remove the tape and the petals, and you just tear off the tip of the female flower, and then you pollinate it with several male flowers, and you tape it back shut, and then you tie a ribbon with a date on it on the stem, and that lets you know when you pollinated that melon and see if it takes, and that will be your seed melon, and it will be pure. That's how you grow multiple varieties of melons and squash and cucumbers and pumpkins if you want to grow more than one varieties and keep them pure. It's hand pollination. That's
Hmm.
why that's why saving watermelon seeds and outcrossing plant seeds is such a pain. You know, that's why it's really such a pain. The best seeds to save, the easiest seeds, and that's why the people built up huge collections was heirloom tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and beans were the easiest plants to save seed from without worrying about too much crossing or intermixing of varieties. Other stuff like the melons, the cucurbits, they are terrible outcrossers, and plants like alliums or like onion seed is terrible outcrossers, and all the brassicas type family, they're dramatic outcrossers too. You have to cage them. I had a friend who used to collect cabbages because cabbages, almost every heirloom cabbage, open pollinated cabbage variety from before 1990 is gone. There's very few of the old cabbages left, maybe
Hmm.
a half a dozen. And to grow them, to pollinate them, you have to build you a cage out of like little small bits of wood and remake cloth, that white frost cloth. You made you a box out of that. You set that box over these blooming plants, and the next day you move it to the other blooming plants and back and forth. Your little groups that way. One day they get pollinated one day, then the other gets pollinated next day, and back and forth. That's how you get them pollinated. It's a lot of work to save cabbage seeds, mustard seeds, turnip seeds, all that.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to save those if you want to grow more than one variety a year.
It's
If
a
you
labor
grow
of love.
one, yep, it's definitely a labor of love.
Wow.
If there used to be a guy named uh, Blaine Bonaire up in Arkansas who had 40 or 50 cages like that. He'd grow that many varieties out every year and swap them out.
That's crazy.
I I feel Teddy like we've just watermelon alone. I feel like we could talk about watermelon for literally the next 10 hours. I love watermelon. I never realized that I guess didn't realize that the South was so well known for watermelon. Why
Yes,
did
that
no
was
one
they
tell
were.
me this, Rob? No one told me. I feel robbed.
But listening to what Rob's saying, Tom, how many watermelon varieties do you think you've eaten in your life? Four, five? You
I
know?
have, yeah, most people only eat maybe three, four, maybe
Yeah.
five if they're lucky. I've had over 300.
Man. Dude,
Is
I
there
have
some is there some bad ones that you wouldn't recommend
Yeah.
also that are gross?
Yes, there's a lot of older ones that didn't just that like Black Diamond. It has a good flavor, but it's full of fiber. So it's like chewing on a terrible cut of steak, but sweet. Is it you can't hardly eat it because it's fiber. Same thing with Cobb Jim, which I think Cobb Jim's extinct now commercially, but it was a huge watermelon, and it would be all if you had a heart, you had a watermelon weigh 100, the biggest watermelon I ever grew was a Cobb Jim. It was 152 pounds.
oh my
And
gosh.
yes, I agree.
What do
It
you
took two people to pick it up. We moved it on an improvised stretcher. We rigged a stretcher up with some heavy duty canvas and between two poles and picked it and rolled it onto this canvas. And me and my friend picked one end, and I got the other end. We towed it out like we was toting a patient. But we yes, that watermelon had an interesting story. We cut it open and it was the heart was about the size of a basketball, and that was the only part worth eating. So
Huh.
we ate the heart and then we juiced the rest of it. We took all the meat out and the seeds out because the seeds were pure, so I saved all those seeds and we juiced the rest of it. And then his brother wanted it. I said, "Why do you want this watermelon?" Because we cut it not quite in half, a little bit less, a little bit. One side was a little bit thicker than the other side. I said, I'm gonna make me a Fourth of July beer cooler for the party barge out of it. So he took it home with him, washed all the sticky stuff out of it, filled it full of ice and stuck beer cans in a big gigantic half of a watermelon, and had it on his party barge, all stuck with beer bottles and beer cans, and using improvised watermelon rind as a beer cooler. It was about 3 feet across and 2 feet 3 feet long, 2 feet across. It held. He said 8 bags of ice.
Holy crap. Dude, I can't even it's so funny because when you go to the store you find these like now they make this small little personal watermelons, right? Like
Personal watermelon. Yeah.
yeah, I mean are those have probably got to be crap too. Dude, I think you've ruined all commercial vegetables for me, Rob. I don't want
The,
to eat anything anymore. Everything sucks, I feel.
The first little personal watermelon was bred by Wilhite. It was called no, it was bred by the University of Florida at Leesburg. It was called Mini Lee. It was about the size of a soccer ball. So that you can actually, if you can find, sometimes you still find Mini Lee. If you Google that, and when you grow your little personal watermelon, that little watermelon is super productive. I had three plants. I made 62 watermelons on three plants about the size of a soccer ball. That's a
Hmm.
little plant productive. They're almost white when they get ripe on the outside and bright red on the inside with little bitty, teeny tiny black seeds, and they taste wonderful. But these newer melons, it's not that they're terrible because they bred to be terrible. It's their cultivation practices. They like I said, they bricks them, and if they all pass the bricks test, they pick them. Whether they're all the same. If 10 watermelons out of per acre pass it, everyone's gone. Whether it's sweet or not. You may have a 6 count bricks, which is about as sweet as a cucumber, right next to a 12 count bricks. But yeah, the watermelons. If you're gonna grow a big watermelon, I would recommend you go online and order Orange Glow. You won't regret that. Stick it under some of your palm trees. Let it run on the ground under your palm trees, and as long as you keep the raccoons from it, they love to cut little perfectly round holes. But that's another thing. Water people never discuss the pests of watermelons. Uh, every animal wants them. The crows will get your little watermelons. They'll break them off and peck them to pieces, and then deer will tear them all to pieces, bust them open with their feet and paw them and eat them. Raccoons cut perfectly round holes in them. The big watermelon, they'll cut multiple holes and reach in there with their little hands and pull out all the watermelon meat. Coyotes love watermelons too.
Hmm.
They will tear them to shreds and eat everything out of a watermelon. You'll find a completely cleaned watermelon with just the rind left, and then bears will come in there and bite into one, pick it, and walk off with it.
How about humans? I feel like
Yeah,
if a human comes by your place, he's probably going to take watermelons too. How do you
yeah.
protect them, Rob? How do you protect them?
Uh, Most of the time I use electric fence for the animals, and I put a sign that says trespassers will be shot on my for the human stealers.
Yeah.
They know me in this neighborhood. They know me. Everybody knows me. I give watermelons away. I don't really have a thieving problem here in this neighborhood. They just call, hey, Robbie, getting watermelons? Sure, come pick you some, or I'll pick them and have them stacked on my porch. And yeah, on my porch, come get them. But yeah, the electric fence works well on the, and another horrible pest for watermelon is voles with a V, Voles. They're little rats without very short
Yeah.
tails.
Yeah.
They will run up to your watermelon and cut a hole in it and go up in there, eat all the meat and all the seeds out of it. Uh, I went to reach down to pick this large Jubilee watermelon one time. I went to pick it up. This thing should have weighed 40 pounds. It weighed 6. I'm like, what? And I rolled it over, and there was a hole in the side of it that had been completely hollowed out.
I gotta
But
tell you, watermelons are always one of those things up north. And back when I lived in Illinois, I always tried to grow watermelon, and I never really got them to grow for whatever reason. So I never had any luck with watermelon. But I really feel like with what you're telling me, I feel like I should be growing watermelon. I don't know, man.
they're fun to grow. They like sandy soil. They don't like heavy clay. They like loam and sand. If you got loam and sand, just dig you a post hole, throw you some good manure and some triple 13 in it, fill it back up, put you a 6 or 7 inch cap of dirt on top of that, and plant your seeds or plants on top of that. The roots will penetrate. Watermelon roots. I did an experiment one time. I dug down by a hill of watermelons. The watermelon roots penetrated 4.5 feet into the ground.
Wow.
They're very drought tolerant. Big old huge tap root. So if you can get them established, they feed off that fertilizer and side dress them, and they love that. They're easy to grow. In fact, I just planted. I found some seeds that I germinated as 30-year-old seeds from Greystone, which is a old Wilhite variety, which has very pale, almost white colored rind and blood red flesh. I planted those among my roses. I just stuck them on let them run underneath the taller roses. Just let the watermelons run underneath there. They already got a drip line, everything, and well mulched so they won't have any fungal splash up spores from the dirt onto their leaves. So hopefully I'll get some watermelons and have seed from them because that's watermelon is totally extinct. USDA and the NSSL lost their seeds to that variety. They're dead. So I'm the only person in the whole country got that plants right now, and I got 8 plants growing right now.
Oh my gosh.
No kidding.
That's
I'm
so
the only
cool, man.
person in the whole
How did
world
you
that
get
has
them,
that.
Rob?
I got the seed from the NSSL. They used to send out seeds to collectors before they stopped that practice. They would send seeds out to private individuals who were collectors and who could verify that there was like members of the Seed Savers Exchange or stuff like that. And they sent me 20 seeds, and I grew these out. The reason these survived the fire is because I had put these in my grandma's deep freeze by mistake in the house, and I meant to carry them out to my into my storage building, but I never carried that little jar full of seeds out to my storage building. My little had the seed packets in the jar. I never carried it out there, so they stayed in there, and they survived when the fire burned up.
Hmm.
And do you freeze
So I
all
was
your
just
seeds?
lucky.
Do you
Yes,
refrigerate? Freeze.
freezing is the best. Refrigeration for seeds and freezing seeds keeps them alive for decades. Tomato seeds in the freezer will last 70 years. I use jars because jars keep the moisture out better than plastic bags. Plastic is not impermeable like glass is. Glass is actually impermeable. You put you some silica gel in there, drop you a couple cheap packets of silica gel into a glass jar, throw your seeds in there, seal them up, and put them in there. Now you're like your palm seeds. If you grow palms, you could take your palm seeds, clean them, put you a couple of bags of silica gel, and stick them in the refrigerator where it's above 40 degrees, and those palm seeds will stay viable for decades.
So
Hmm.
when I started talking to you, Rob, I don't even know how I met you, to be honest with you. But I do know you know Dr. Creech.
I've been knowing him for over almost 30 years.
Teddy, is this like every episode we ask our guest, do you know Dr. Creech? And they shake their head like, yeah, I know that
Yep.
guy.
Yep.
He was well known through here back when I was a young man. I actually met him through Sherwood Akins and all. He recommended I go out to SFA, and I went out there, and that's how I got to know Dr. Creech. Sherwood Akins was the Mayhaw man that lived up in Minden, just south of Minden, Louisiana, in the town of Sibley. He had one of the rarest collections. He had a nursery that specialized in super rare fruit trees and super rare ornamental plants stuff you can't get anywhere. And he got a lot from Dr. Creech. He got a lot from SFA. he had the biggest collection of mayhaw varieties I ever seen and have seen since. He had probably 52 different kinds of mayhaws, and some he had found himself. And he had like 62 kinds of fig trees, and he had stuff like you've never seen before. That man, he taught me how to root maple trees. I can root Japanese maples. I haven't done it in a long time, but I know how to root Japanese maples, and it takes 4 months for them to actually root, and you have to keep the mister on them every 20 minutes for 20 seconds, 24/7 to get them things to root.
Hmm.
It's difficult, but you can do it. He taught me how to a lot of stuff. I used to work for plants from him. I'd go up there on a Saturday, get there at 7:30 in the morning. So it was an hour drive, and I'd drive up there from down here and work all day on Saturday in exchange for 6 plants
That's
every other
dedication.
Saturday. That's how I built my beautiful yard up at my old house. Uh, every other week I got 6 plants no one else in the whole entire parish had.
Huh.
He said that was the best deal he ever seen. Somebody had to pay no money to work for him.
That's good labor. That's plant labor.
He was a good man. He was a good man. He lived to be 93 years old. He died in I think he died in 2012 or 13. He was a good guy. He had a big collection of hardy citrus too. He had the most northern citrus orchard in the country.
Are you still grow or what palms are you growing? Do you grow palms at all?
I just planted a whole entire pot full of Sabal, Louisiana. I collected off these big Sabal trees in Alexandria. That's a palm that my botanist friends call me wrong, but that palm there is not minor. I have grown minor and I have seen minor. This palm, I can take you to, if you're ever here, gonna be in this area, I can take you to see a garden that's got Sabal, Louisiana with 6 to 8 foot trunks that are a foot and a half across with 6 foot wide leaves. That is definitely not palmetto. Those leaves are not Costa palmate. They're just flat like a minor. Oh, that's just a variation of minor. I said it
Yeah.
comes true from seed, and it doesn't, and it's in the wild. I see trunks everywhere in the wild, and all the minor I know don't make trunks like that. Me and my botanist friends, the main difference they can agree that it's difference is the flowering period. Its flowers different time period than the regular minor. But do you grow Sable, Louisiana?
I grow a lot. Teddy and
Oh
I both
yeah.
have a lot of Sabal, Louisiana. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Have you ever seen mature plants with gigantic trunks on them?
Oh yeah. At the Southeastern Palm Society, the home garden in Savannah, that in Savannah, Georgia, that Tom McClendon and Joe Levert run there. They've got three right in a row, and they've got 8 feet of clear trunk. Beautiful. And
You ought,
go ahead. I'm
you ought
sorry.
to you ought to go to if you're passing through Alexandria, Louisiana. There is a historic house. I cannot say the name of it off the top of my head. That's got a garden full of them. They have seeded everywhere in the garden, and it's doing something I didn't know it did before. It suckers. All these trees have. I thought they were seedlings, but so I dug around one of the trees. And it was attached to the base, and these
Mm.
huge, these huge Sable Louisianas, and with these big pups all around them at the base. And I thought that was just seedlings come up down there, but they were attached to the trunk.
That's interesting.
That's something that you need to look into there, Tom, with your what Antilensis or Logidania.
Yeah, I have Antilensis is that for some reason of the only sables I've ever grown that these guys are multi-trunks and I've had a lot of them for some reason. It's very, very like two. I have one that has three, which is very, very unusual. I've never seen that with anything else I've ever grown.
And I found a neat population of sable minor that only gets a little over knee high. It's probably about an acre of it, and none of it in that population is barely maybe 2 feet at the most. Most of it's knee high, and it has inflorescences that are about 3 feet tall. That's a little dwarf palmetto. It's a really cute plant. You want seeds of it
Wow.
next year? I can collect some.
Oh yeah.
We
I'm glad we got onto palms really quick, Rob. because this has been a subject of high contention for years. That a lot of people are in the camp that they say Sable, Louisiana, it's just Sable Minor.
Yeah,
But
I
but
disagree.
you've got Sable Minor in Louisiana, and you also have Sable, Louisiana, which morphologically they look completely different. And it's not the
The
same
flowers are
thing.
more different.
Yeah. So I'm glad a guy from Louisiana is confirming this here. This makes me really happy.
I love it.
I'm gonna make y'all mad when I tell you my favorite palm.
Go
My
ahead.
favorite palm is Bootia.
Yeah.
I love that palm. The fruits taste wonderful, and I like to grow it. It's a neat palm.
Are you
It,
are you eight B technically?
I'm 8B within about 30 miles of Zone 9A, but the last 5 or 6 years I've had Zone 7 and 6 winters.
And what's your town again?
Coshada is my zip code town.
Oh, you're in Coushatta.
Coshada.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Coushatta. Interesting. Dude, you are not. I'm looking at a map. You're probably maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours east of my ranch.
I'm about not quite
Not
about two
far.
hours, a little more, a little less from Nacogdoches, from Stephen F. Austin University,
Okay. Yeah, I'm a half hour northwest of Nacogdoches.
and I'm a good bit ways from Lufkin. Though I'm about 2.5, 3 hours from Lufkin. It just seems takes a long time to get there.
Man, that's interesting. This is I get the passion in your voice and just you about, like I said, preserving history and seeds. Just, there's so many oddballs out there. I feel like that's me in the Sable world. Like Teddy and I are always, hey, we have this actual, like our ecotypes of sables, right? Just some oddballs that we tend to find. I always come home with seeds from everywhere I go. I find something interesting, and then in my nursery, I just have, 5 or 6 bags of this weird sable that nobody else probably ever wants, but I seem to want.
I got up here in Coshada. There's two sables that were planted from seed back in 1960. I think they're sable palmettos. This guy, older guy, I knew collected them. He told me the whole history of these palms. He is deceased now, but uh, one palm grew to a tall, skinny one, and one grew much shorter and chunkier, and they come off the same tree he collected in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And they have survived the famous 83, 84 freeze with no injury, and they survived that 0 degrees with no injury. And they survived major droughts, major rainy periods. No, they're fine. And one of them has much smaller leaves and much thinner trunk, way tall, and the other one is much stouter. I did not realize there was that much genetic variation within sable palmetto.
There's a lot. We spent a lot of time on a couple episodes ago talking about the variability of palmetto. It's if you could grow one species of sable in your yard and you're going to grow 25 or 50 or 100 of them, you're going to get a lot of variation in that yard. The question I have for you, Rob, is you make the comment about loblollies are very common out by you now because out by my ranch, it's all pine country, so there's tons of loblollies everywhere. Do you see? But the one thing that's interesting is I don't know if it's because of just a lack of either wanting to grow them, a lack of knowing that you can grow them, or less people doing what we do. But I don't see a lot of palms out in East Texas. Like not, it's just a crap ton of pines.
And people don't grow palms because they don't know what they are and they're expensive. Palms think people tend to think palms are tropical. They'll go buy these tropical palms. My neighbor around the road just went to Walmart and bought a bunch of these queen palms. I said, they're not going to live. They told me at Walmart they would. I said, that's a queen palm. That's going to die in the first 26-degree freeze. It's dead. That's not what they told me. I said, they wrong.
He needs to call us.
And
He needs to call
I told
Teddy.
him that I told him that. I said, if you want palms, I know some good friends that got some, and I also know you go to Forest Hill and you get you some trachy copper windmill palms, and they'll never die. They'll just live and get uglier and uglier and uglier as they get bigger and bigger and bigger. But they
That's
won't
true.
live. You can't kill them. Now I had a really good trachycarpus strain that produced huge, beautiful green leaves, and it was. I grew it. I got it from seed from a friend of mine who got it from another dude in Georgia, and this was the prettiest one I ever seen in my life. It made a thick trunk and it grew fast, but the leaves were huge, over 3 feet across,
Hmm.
and it grew up to a foot a year. And my neighbor, when I sold my house, the new guy who bought it, cut it down. But it went from being a 3 gallon plant I had grew in a pot to 17 feet tall in less than 20 years. I had a regular one beside. I bought a regular one and put beside it. They didn't look the same. They're
Hmm.
different.
That's very
But
interesting.
but that's not my palm. My experience with palm is just rather limited because I have terrible luck germinating them except for Sabal palmet, the Sabal species. They germinate like weeds,
Yeah.
but and the Trachycarpus germinate, they germinate really like weeds. But those older other palms, they don't germinate for me too well. Soils, I guess something about them. I just take a 25-gallon pot and spread sable seeds across the top of that I've cleaned up and I'll wash and water them and just keep them watered. Every time I water them in the nursery, they just come up like grass.
Yep. That's right.
So tell us a little bit about your nursery and and what you do.
Currently, it's closed right now until I can get everything done. But my little nursery, I specialize in roses, heirloom plants, and strange, unusual plants and native plants. When I have it open, I also carry roses to different rose events and different plant sales. But it's just a little nursery. I home built me some greenhouses because I said I'm not paying $5,000 for a greenhouse. So I built a 28 by 14-foot greenhouse and then a special 12 by 28-foot mist house, strictly used for misting cuttings. And I built both of them for less than $2,000.
Wow.
And they're heated and cooled, and they've produced a lot of rose bushes and a lot of seedlings and a lot of plants in those greenhouses. And the only weakness I did not know, I had built a greenhouse before like this, but I did not know the PVC had changed formula. They changed the formula of polyvinyl chloride and to make it safer for drinking water, but it also caused it to gas out chlorine gas during when it gets hot. The greenhouse gets hot,
Yeah.
so when it gases that chlorine gas, it destroys your poly. So your poly comes is destroyed wherever the pipe touches the poly. So I had to cover
Hmm.
all my pipe with pipe insulation and tape and paint. But that was still not too hard. I
Hmm.
lost a. I was like, my 6 year poly went bad in a year and a half. What's going on? And that's when I found it out because the first hoop house I built in 2004 didn't have that problem because it used an old form of they used the old original recipe for PVC.
Hmm.
And it survived the snow we had, that big horrible snowstorm. The last two, one in 2021 and the one in last year, it didn't even bend it in.
That's been a common thread through this whole talk is that over time everything changes.
Everything
And
sucks,
I,
doesn't
Mhm.
and I think that that's true with what you were saying, Tom, with palm or with pine trees too. I think these are all genetically modified now, aren't they, to grow wood? Isn't that right?
Yes, they're not genetically modified. Some of them are, but most of these are grown in controlled crosses. They have seed orchards, massive seed orchards for loblolly pines in South Carolina. Uh, that's where a lot of your raked pine straw comes from. These seed orchards, they keep the undergrowth completely clean. These trees are planted on 40-foot centers, and they're kept pruned. They have these cherry picker things that raise up people up in baskets. They prune these pines. They hand pollinate these pines. They plant they graft them. They graft some of these trees may have 5 or 6 different pollen varieties grafted onto them. So you have 100 acres of seeds, and they pick them like apples. These trees are not shaken and pick the pine cones off the ground. They have cherry pickers when they come in there and they pick the pine cones and fill up crates, big wooden crates, and then they take these big wooden crates and put them into heated, almost like a kiln. These big barns, they pump heat in there, probably around 200 degrees, maybe 150, 175 degrees. And it causes the pine cones to open up, and then they shake these things, and all the seeds fall out through the crates to the bottom into these big tubs. They shake them and shake them to no more seeds fall out. And then they go dump the pine cones and take these seeds and run them through a machine. It deweans them. It removes the wings off the seeds and polishes the seeds, and that's how your pine seeds are produced. They're all it's all big complicated nursery process. They produce many millions of seeds off of small these 40-acre plots. But these trees are pampered. They're all grafted onto different rootstock, different loblolly rootstocks. I mean, these trees are not just go planted regular pine trees and they pick the seed off. Oh no, it's and they do it so they can grow wood, and you can get a 2x4 and with only 6 or 7 growth rings in it. And those are not good. Those lumber is much inferior to older lumber. It's they grow too fast.
Well,
It's like I like
so it's funny because you said that it grows too fast and equating fast with not good. It's funny because I always laugh about the same thing is everybody who wants palms wants them big and wants them fast. And everybody, it's a labor of love and it's an exercise in patience to be able to start any sable from a 1 gallon or like a liner or a 3 gallon. And then to see it, I mean, I just now finally, Teddy, our Mexicana that was put in the ground as like a 3 gallon in 2020, finally now is starting to look like it has a trunk, like finally. And people don't want to go slow, they want to go fast. And so
it's
they're
always
always
instant gratification.
instant gratification and
Yeah.
and that's why you see so many like robustas planted around here because they grow 2-3 feet a year and you get 1 to 2 or 3 good warm kinds of winters and then they die right after that because it's bound to get killed at some point, but people want speed. And I always tell my kids always take it slow because if you take it slow things are going to go better. But yeah, I mean, everyone wants, and I've heard all this new lumber is terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
It's just terrible. If you ever do any framing, use Pacific Northwest spruce. Use spruce studs and spruce lumber if you're going to frame anything up that you want it good and square. I worked as a carpenter for my grandpa for 15 years. Plus, I worked on the lumber industry for at this store and retail for 25 years. So um, yeah, definitely use spruce. If you want something that's going to be good and square, pine if you don't really particularly worried about it being square, but spruce, yeah, buy spruce studs or spruce 2x. They're much more stable and they don't warp as easy. But yeah, my friend bought had a pool put in. He bought 20 uh saddle palmettos with 8 foot clear trunks to plant around that. That's probably a year. That was probably almost a what about $20,000 for that? Those 20 trees, something like that. Those palms are not cheap.
No, they're not.
But he's a dentist, so he wanted instant palm trees. I told him to plant other species look better than just sable palmetto around your palm. Oh, they grow too slow. That's another thing about palms. Oh, they're always accused of growing slow. But I like slow and steady trees. That's why in my old yard I had all kind of sables. I had several different species of boodia. And if you want a fast palm, plant trachycarpus. That plant grows as fast as almost as a robusta.
Yeah.
Not quite, but almost.
Yeah.
And
There's this misconception with palms though of like when like people think that they don't actually have a palm until it has like clear trunk. But I don't know why that's the case. Like I grow them from seed, and I hang out with them when they got strap leaves and split leaves and first palmade into 3 gallon. And when I plant those I've had palms in the ground here for 15 years and grown up with them. You still got a palmetto when it's small. It's still a palmetto. Like why do you think
yeah,
it's not a palmetto because it's small? You know?
this culture has rewards instant gratification. It's all you got to have everything perfect and fast.
Well,
And
the
that's
the other thing you get though, honestly, is if you grow them from that young stage here, Teddy, is you get an appreciation, you get experience, you start to see issues that can happen throughout, and it just makes you a better grower. You're always
Oh,
out
for
there.
sure.
I mean, how many times am I outside taking a look at strap leaves constantly? And they don't change that quickly, but you see a lot of differences and you get the variability rather than just, it's great that, look, I'm not going to lie. in Gulf Shores 2 weeks ago on vacation. It was amazing walking from our rental house down to the beach and seeing all the palmettos. Like it was beautiful because you have what you would see or call, a mature palm. But you if that's all you bought, and and at the first time that you have a disease or you have a pest or some strange something, you would have no idea because you've missed the last 15 years of growth. So it makes you a better grower, I think.
I much prefer seedlings and small trees to these big giant trees they sell in 25-gallon pots or these big ball and burlap. I'd rather plant a 3-gallon live oak than one that's in a 7 or 25 gallons. And, they grow better, they adapt better to the soil. That
Yep.
when you plant something small, they take off a lot better because they have time to grow into the soil. If you take something that's big, in particular, it's been growing in a totally different environment, it's like, uh-oh, I don't like this place.
Yep.
And these little trees, these little palms, you put a 3-gallon sable, it's just got strap leaves or split leaves. It has time to get used to that soil and adapt, and then grow into your big tree. And it's all about adaptation. Smaller plants, seedling 2-year-old seedling maple in a 3-gallon pot is a whole lot better, I think, than a balled and burlapped one or a 25-gallon pot. It doesn't get stressed. Your stress is a key when you're doing plants. It doesn't matter if it's vegetables or flowers or roses or palms. Stress is important to avoid that. Stress is your number one enemy. And you put something big in the ground, it takes a lot more water, a lot more worry, and a lot more concern. Like a 7-gallon or a 25-gallon planted tree requires a lot more water than a 3-gallon. You soak that 3-gallon, it's going to reserve its water lot more than a 25-gallon because you got to get that root ball. And it's going to spread that root ball out fast, that 3-gallon, much faster than that 7 or 25-gallon one. I've seen trees blow over after been planted about 5 or 6 years, blow over, and the root ball is still basically the pot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they say that with cactus a lot. Like cactus will it'll like, they say call it corking. Like it just wants to stay the size that the root ball is. So when you transplant cactus, you got to break up that root ball when you put it into a new pot. Or it just has a tendency just to stay how it is. And that's how it is with big root bound potted palm trees as well. Yeah. They don't like to venture out because they live that long, the way they are. But that's dangerous because if they're not going into the native soil, unless you're sitting there watering them every day, they've got a good chance of drying out and dying for sure.
That's true. And they will adapt. Those palms will stay small in those pots. I grew a Phoenix reclinata in a pot for years in my old house. That thing, I had it for like 10, 12 years. It never outgrew the 25-gallon pot it was in. I just strapped it to a dolly, wheeled it in the greenhouse. And when it got wheeled it back out, I lived on my patio for 10 years. I gave it to somebody in Shreveport, and they still got it alive to this day
Hmm.
in a 25-gallon pot. Happy as can be. But you can't put that in the ground. It's not hardy. It was a gift, and that's why I kept it. That's why I have coral knockout in my rose collection. The elderly lady bought me 3 of them, thinking she was buying me a wonderful gift, and it was a knockout rose. But I don't particularly grow a lot of knockouts, but it was a gift from this elderly lady, so I stuck it in my garden to honor her.
Tell us about your roses, Rob.
Oh, I do roses like I do watermelons. I have probably anywhere from 325 to 370 uh, different cultivars of roses. I have the vast majority of are China, tea, and noisettes. That's the vast majority of the ones I have in my collection. China roses originated probably, I'd say, in the 1700s, late 1700s. In they're bred from a rose called Rosa chinensis, which the old-fashioned sport of Rosa chinensis was common in China for the last 1,000 years or more. It's called Parsons Pink or Old Blush. I have that rose. It's a wonderful rose. You can't kill it. It roots like a weed. It's just it's just amazing. And the Europeans took that rose to Europe along with a red rose called sanguine from China and started creating these various China roses from it. And then here's a neat fact: the Noisette rose, even though it has a French name, was the first rose to be originated in the Americas, in North America and U.S. Specifically, it was accidentally crossed in Charleston, South Carolina. A musk rose crossed with a China rose came up with this big sprawling shrub that produced fragrant semi-double pink flowers. And that rose was this French man fell in love with it and took cuttings from this guy's. His name was last name was Champney, not Chapney, but Champney. And he took cuttings back to France, and the French went nuts over this Champney's pink cluster and began to breed all these noisettes in France. And then they came back to the U.S. where they came from. It's a really interesting thing.
Hmm.
And tea roses originated from a cross between uh, Parsons Pink, uh, let's see, Fortune's Five Color, and Hume's Blush. Those were all common roses in China, which Hume's Blush is presumed extinct, though it's probably still around in China somewhere. It's a big country with a lot of cottages, so I would assume that Hume's Blush is still around. I have what they call Hume's Blush from Laos, the Laos farm. Uh, but it just reminds me of one of these typical pink Chinese red roses from the 5, 6, 700 years ago that it's has the neck that's bent, and it's really interesting rose. You can check out my Facebook page. I have some posted on it. But tea roses are bred or a rose from those crosses. Tea roses are very awesome. They tough as nails. They can live once you get them established. They don't even have to have water in the summertime. I have one that I planted out just to see if it would live back in 2022. It has not been sprayed, watered, or fertilized, and it produces tons of flowers every year. And that's how come they lived in cemeteries so long, was because of their indestructibility. I have found the roses in cemeteries is probably 120 years old, maybe older. There's a Safrano in a cemetery in Natchitoches that has to be the grave it's on is 1880s, and the rose itself has almost a 9-inch diameter trunk at the base,
Wow.
and it's massive. The plant's 10 foot by 10 foot. Has a beautiful. That's the first. Safrano is the first tea rose. It was also the first rose ever grown under glass by the cut flower industry in France and Italy. It's the first cut flower rose ever grown, and I have it. And it's a wonderful rose. The flowers kind of like a salmony orange, and they open up and fade to almost like a pinky color. And it's a really beautiful rose. It's quite fragrant, but the buds are spectacular. And it's literally the first tea rose. And then that started a craze. You had your two types of tea roses. You had your loose flowered ones, the Nabanon types, and then you had your really double types. And they're both indestructible, though some of them have better plants, better characteristics than the others. The older ones tend to be tougher. The newer ones tend to be like when it rains a lot, the flowers don't open up correctly. They ball into these big nasty balls because they have so many. One of them I took apart. I picked a mature flower, brought it in the house, took a pair of tweezers, and took it apart. 142 petals in that flower.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that
Really?
double.
That's a that's a lot of petals.
And then that's how you got hybrid teas. They crossed a tea rose with a rose called a hybrid perpetual. Hybrid perpetuals don't do too well in the South. I have like maybe 5 or 6 of them. They tend to make these big, long, ropey growths that just stick up like blackberry canes. You have to pin them to the ground almost to make them bloom pretty. And they crossed those with tea roses to get hybrid teas. And the early hybrid teas were okay. They weren't particularly uh, disease magnets like the modern roses are. But then somebody named Pertinet from France crossed uh, hybrid teas with the yellow rose of Persia, and to introduce colors, bright oranges and bright yellows and bright colors into the hybrid teas. He also introduced the gene for black spot susceptibility, extreme black spot susceptibility into that rose through that breeding. So almost all those first complicated hybrid teas were called Pertinet roses, and that name is no longer used because it's been phased out. But that's where all the colors in the hybrids come from crossing with that yellow rose of Persia. That's where you get all these blues, bluish purple colors, all these bright yellows, bright oranges, salmons, these hot colors. Uh, though some of these roses were actually pretty disease resistant. There's one from 1950 Pertinae, one of the last Pertinaes, called Laughter. You can't kill that rose. It doesn't get any black spot. I don't even know if it's I looked at the parentage of it. It's definitely got that breeding into it, and it's indestructible. I guess one out of 1,000 could be good using those hybrid teas, but all in all, my roses are on root too. Some of them would probably do better if they were grafted, but I refuse to do grafted roses because if you take a grafted rose and you break it off at the ground level, it comes back. It's going to be the root stock.
Yep.
You take one of these on root roses and you break it off, it'll come back to what it was. But I grow some hybrid musks, some ramblers. I'm part of the Preserve the Rambler initiative. Rambler roses fell out of popularity because they don't bloom all the time. They bloom once a year in the spring and then they're done. You just got a thorn bush or a thorny, viney bush. And so they've been declining. You see a lot of these old ramblers and ditches around here. They bloom pink and pinkish and reddish colors in these ditches. Those are Lady Godiva, Dorothy Perkins. That was one of the earliest roses that almost got patented, but it wasn't. That's before the patent office lets you patent things that were plants. The first patent plant was a rose called New Dawn. It's a rambler rose sport that blooms on and off all year round instead of just one time. That's plant patent number one. PVP number one is the rose New Dawn. I have it, which is expired. You can whatever you want to, but uh, this man found it, and it was one of the first climbing roses that bloomed constantly, and that's why he patented. But I grow mostly old ones, and they because I like to preserve the genetic, and I just like roses. These are indestructible. These aren't like the ones you have to. I spray mine maybe once a month, every other month, something like that. Maybe sometimes twice a month if it's mildew season, but you don't have to. I just do it to keep leaves on there to take cuttings. And I found a lot of roses that Dr. Welch found. Y'all familiar with William C. Welch, Dr. Bill Welch?
Mm-mm.
He
Oh,
was a famous East Texans plant person, and he wrote a lot of books. He also wrote a lot of books with Greg Grant. Y'all know him? He's from
Mm-mm.
East Texas. He's a very famous county agent and has done everything under the sun with plants in East Texas. Uh, he wrote several good books on antique roses. But I went back to these Natchitoches cemeteries. I love rose rustling. Uh, and in one cemetery in Natchitoches, I found Safrano, Natchitoches Noisette, Ramosi Superior, Madame Pierre Auger, uh, Dorothy Perkins, Debutante, Lady Godiva, a rose called Uten, which is not ancient. Uten is from the 1950s, but it was planted everywhere. It's a beautiful rose. And the they call it the Chickasaw rose or the memorial rose. I found all that in that one cemetery, and I did that searching back in 2021. The new grounds crew has eliminated almost every one of them because of mismanagement. And they don't know what they're doing. They've killed almost every of the heirloom plants out of there, all the crinums, all the irises. They weeded them down to the dirt, and they don't know what they're doing in the city. I've been trying to talk to the city. I offered the city because I propagated those roses. I have those rooted cuttings from those roses in my nursery, and I've got more cuttings rooted. I've even offered to donate roses to replant the cemetery, but the lawn crew don't want them in there, so because it's difficult to take care of. You don't you kill them when you weed eat them or spray them with glyphosate.
Shocking.
Roses are very sensitive. Roses are very sensitive to herbicides. Don't spray around roses. Um, but I collect them. I have let's see some representations of the hybrid musks. That's a wonderful series of rose. Uh, Dr. Reverend Pemberton from England did a lot of breeding of hybrid musks, and they are some really nice roses, especially skyrocket. You get big clusters of flowers maybe 150 flowers in one big cluster, a big, huge red cluster. They're gorgeous. They're just gorgeous, and they do well in the South. See, most of these roses do well in the South. They're not North roses. Most of these old roses, like teas and chinas and noisettes, they're all Southern roses, zone 6 and down. Uh, More northern roses would be your hybrid perpetuals, your rugosas, and stuff like that. They don't do well here in the South. Oh, they will grow, but they're not happy. But it's just amazing the diversity of these things that need to be preserved that's been lost. I have so many old books on these old roses, and most of these old roses are gone. If you go on this website called Help Me Find Roses, it's a website specializes in roses. It has every kind of rose you could think of. You can pull up these black and white pictures or old color catalog pictures of these extinct roses, and it's really, really sad that these things have. It's like the watermelons. It's really sad that these things are gone because they're so much better than what's sold in the stores.
Yeah.
Knockouts and drifts are boring. They're overplanted, and they cause, and the reason they're overplanted so much has caused rose rosette virus to explode across the South, because you should not plant 500 rose bushes in an area that's the size of a house. They just plant these things on 14-inch centers, and that virus gets in there and it just spreads into one gigantic virus hub. And the little mites that spread the virus are like pinhead size, and they float through the air and go on to infect every other rose that they land on from miles away. And it's just and it's all because of these mass plantings. And you just shouldn't do that. My rose, I have 300 and something roses, but they're planted on 6 to 8 foot centers. And some of these roses have already almost touched each other in 6 to 8 foot centers. That's how big these old roses get.
Wow.
And and I keep them pruned and taken care of, but they're not all the same. They're all genetically different. They're different. They're not, my grow out feels more of a display garden, if you know what I mean. It's like tea roses here, China roses here. And I also plant a lot of heirloom daylilies and irises. I have probably 200 kinds of heirloom bearded iris and probably
Awesome.
150 heirloom daylilies mixed
I
in there
love
with them. And
I love irises. They're beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. And the colors too. It's absolutely incredible.
where you're from, bearded irises do really well up north. They love the cold and the
Yeah.
freezing. Some of the older ones do well here. The only problem they have here, they tend to over multiply. Some of these will multiply like gangbusters. But roses are, excuse me, but roses are so easy to propagate. If you got a mist system, I can I can root 10,000 cuttings if I had the time to take 10,000 cuttings with about 90% success rate. And they're just these old roses. They're wonderful in landscapes. You put maybe one, two, you mix them with your landscape. You never put a whole landscape of all roses. You mix them with your flowers. Next year, I plan on planting lots of zinnias and cosmoses and other heirloom type of selections of those plants, all mixed in with my roses. I'm just stick them all out there to have a diverse garden. But people, like if you have a landscape, these roses here just fit in with your landscape. You got a shrub border, stick you a couple of tea roses in there, because you don't prune these like you do hybrid teas. These roses resent pruning. If you really prune them things, they will get mad at you and sulk or may even die. China roses are more forgiving. You can pretty much chainsaw them to the ground. But the tea roses, they are they're very sensitive to over pruning. And the history of those old French teas is very interesting. Why they're so tough. The French had a special way of growing these tea roses. That's where 90% of the tea roses were raised in France. The French would take these roses, the seeds, and plant the seeds and get the seedlings growing, and they would transplant these seedlings into a field and walk away. And the field would sit neglected, no weeding, no fertilizing, no watering for 3 years. And they would go back and see what was survived. And those survivors, they would transplant into a trial garden and see which one had the prettiest flowers. And the one that had the prettiest flowers is the ones they kept. And then they'd go over those and see which one was the best, and they'd discard. So you might get 3 roses out of a huge long row of seedlings.
It makes sense though.
And
That makes complete sense. Absolutely.
that's how come roses like Safrano can live to be that big. When you buy a Mr. Lincoln from the Walmart planting in your yard, you get 1 or 2 years and it's dead, nothing left but the rootstock. because the rootstock of these grafted hybrid teas, they'll live forever. These are Fortunianas or Dr. Huey, which is Dr. Huey's actually heirloom rose from 1910. They use it as a rootstock because it's so vigorous. It's called Dr. Huey. It has a funny color, red flower. The flowers are kind of a
Oh wow.
darkish, reddish, burgundy color, and you see it everywhere. And it's just the rootstock of a grafted rose that has died.
Hmm.
And the French are amazing. There's a neat story to the rose called Leonie Lemaiche. Uh, this one guy named David Duché wanted to marry this other rose breeder's daughter. Her name was Leonie Lemaiche, and her father was a rose breeder too. He said, "You can't marry my daughter till you breed a rose worthy of her name." So he took him 7 years of breeding and selecting, and he finally bred a rose that's worthy of her name called Leonie Lemaiche. It's a beautiful rose. It opens up pale pinkish orange and turns deep orange and then pink, and it's indestructible. It has
Hmm.
beautiful droopy leaves, and it blooms all the time. It is a
Man,
fine rose.
man,
My nurse,
I've been saying this lately. Sorry to cut you off, Rob. I've been saying this lately to Tom and our other friend Tom and Joe. Um, I've been finding all this like just romance and stuff in like travel and plants. I want that rose that you just talked about. Like
Yeah.
that hit me in my heartstrings, and I want that. You know what I mean? Like I
Mhm.
like the stories about plants. That does something for me. I don't know what it is, but I like it.
that's one of these roses. Let me tell you the story of the fried chicken rose.
I
this
like
is
it
this is a
already.
neat, this is a neat rose. They were doing a highway project in Alexandria, and me uh, and this the rose ladies down there were searching for these roses, going through looking at these old houses for roses, and they stopped at this old row house that's been to be tore down when they did the project. And there's this big pretty rose bush blooming there. And there was a kid on the front porch sitting there eating some chicken, and she asked this kid, should she have a cutting of that rose? The kid looked at her like she was crazy and called the grandma out there. My grandma said, "Sure, you can have cuttings." So we're finna have to move out of the house in a couple of weeks, and she said, "Take root me some rose cuttings." So they took a bunch of cuttings of this rose. They took it home with them, and she rooted a bunch of cuttings, and she brought the lady a rooted one back right before they moved out of the house, and it was bulldozed and paved over. And they grew this rose in several of their gardens. They had no idea what it was. It was a rose that opened up pale pink and peachy color and faded to a darker pink during the springtime, and then the summertime it opened up deep pink. It was a totally different color during the temperatures. Temperatures affect this rose greatly, and they just called it the fried chicken rose. Well, I was at one of their gardens one day, and I said, "Oh, I know that rose." She was calling it fried chicken. I said, "I know what that is. That's the real name of that rose is Madame Lambard. It's a French rose." And so we identified the fried chicken rose as the rose Madame Lambard. And then we looked it up online, and sure enough, it was 100% match. So
No
I knew
kidding.
I'd seen that rose somewhere.
That's
But
cool.
that's what rose rosing is fun. I have actually driven all through these neighborhoods in Natchitoches, and I have bought roses from these people's yards. I have rustled roses from empty house places. I've been chased by dogs. I've been chased by one of the funniest things. I was collecting some cuttings off of a rose that turned out to be silver moon across a ditch from this old lady's house, and I was collecting cuttings. And her chickens come over there and started poking around while I was collecting cuttings. I heard this lady start yelling at me. I said, "Ma'am, she said, you stealing my chickens. You're stealing my chickens." I said, "No, ma'am, I'm taking roses out off this old fence row." "Oh, you're stealing my chickens." Started swinging a broom at me. So I hurried up and ran and got in my car and left before she hit me with the broom again. I've never been chased away by an old lady with a broom while taking rose cuttings. That was one of my most unusual rose rustling experiences. I also had a cop stop me one time because I stopped by a house that was used for kind of illicit businesses. They had this big, huge, rambling rose in their yard that it was about the size of that 20 feet by 20 feet, covered in pink flowers. It was a rose I'd never seen before. I said, I stopped there, and the kid off the porch jumped up and run down to the truck and said, "What you need?" Leaned in my truck and said, "What you need?" I said, "I need a limb off that rose bush over there. Will you take $15?" He just looked at me and blinked, like, "What?" I said, I need a limb of that rose bush over there. That old thing? I said, "Yes, sir," to the young kid. I pulled out my pruning shears and handed him, "You could cut me one?" He went up there and snipped me off a big, nice limb before I could root and brought it back. I pulled it and put it in my car. And he handed me back the clippers, and I handed him the $15. And he said, "You sure that's all you need?" I said, "That's all I need. Thank you, good sir. You have a good day." And I drove off and took it home and stuck it and rooted. I got 8 of them to root out of 12 cuttings. And I got it in my garden to this day and identified it as the old rambling rose called Iriasne, an old French rose called Iriasne.
Mm.
It only blooms once a year, but it's a beast, and it will never. Once you get it growing, it never goes anywhere.
How did
It'll
these
just
roses, how did all these roses get here, Rob?
they were spread around by seed companies. Seed companies would sell roses, and then grandmas would buy one, and then she'd root cuttings of it and give it to their friends. These grandmas had something that the old people, could do something we can't do nowadays. They could chop off a limb off of a rose bush, stick it in the ground, and pour water on it, and it would root. I have to have a $300 mist system to root roses. Yet I've seen my aunt do it, and I tried it myself, and it does not work. There was something in their little touch that could do that, but they'd pass along. It's called pass along plants. These old roses, they'd root them in coffee cans and in wet places and flower beds, and dig them up and give them to their friends. Whenever they pruned a rose, they'd stick it in the ground, and it would root. And then some of these running roses, when they touch the ground, they root. So they'd take and lay a brick on top of the runner, and it would root, and they would cut it and then dig it up and give it to their friends. That's how a lot of these running roses were spread. But you look in these seed catalogs. I got a seed catalog where it says three nice roses. These are all tea roses from around 1905. Three nice tea roses, your choice, and for $3.10 postpaid. And all the people say nowadays say, "Oh, that was cheap," but 1903, $3.10 was a lot of money. But that's how they would order that. They would deliver these roses to your house, and you'd pay the postal person and go out there and plant your roses
Mm.
and new root cuttings off of them. And the same thing with all these old heirloom irises. You would order these in the mail. You could get 5 bearded iris plants for 35 cents in the mail.
Wow.
And you would plant these irises, and as they would multiply, they would be passed along. And the same thing with these big old pink azaleas you see everywhere. They root where they touch the ground, and people go around the edge of these azalea bushes and dig up these azaleas and pass them to their friends or transplant them across their yard. It's all about passing around or passing. Back in the old days, like I have a story about a crabapple eye that was very common when I was a kid. It's a big rosy bloom type crab that was probably from the late 1800s. That was all over Louisiana in all these old people's yards. But as time passed, they got less and less because these old people that passed them around died, and these newer people, they didn't want a crab apple in their yard. So by about the year 1999, most of them were gone, and by the year 2002, I searched everywhere and couldn't find any. I looked everywhere. I drove almost every parish road, or I did drive every parish road in every parish, and I drove every parish road in North Natchitoches Parish and DeSoto Parish, couldn't find them. So I said, "Oh, it's extinct." Well, back in 2022, I was recovering from surgery and was off work for a month. So I was driving down this little road just looking for stuff, and there was one in an old house place. I said, "Holy moly." So I jumped out. I said, "There's no suckers. There's no suckers coming up from the ground. I can't dig no root because it would sucker on its own roots and make little suckers." So I took cuttings. I said, "I've never rooted a crab apple before, so maybe I can do this." People say you got to graft apples or you can't propagate them. So I took cuttings and said, "I'm going to try this." I rooted them. I rooted 6 of them, and I've given them away to several different people. And one is in my garden right now. It was in a 3-gallon pot, 4 feet tall last year. I put it in the ground, and this spring it's 12 feet tall, 6 feet across. It loves that soil, that rose soil. I get it in my rose garden because it blooms beautiful pink flowers. And I'm going to send grafting wood to several friends of mine. And I'm going to stick some more cuttings next week of it to try to get. So I want this back in the market because people say you can't grow crab apples in the South. This is a good triple purpose crab apple. It has beautiful flowers, beautiful purple leaves. and cherry-sized fruit that makes a wonderful pink jelly.
Mhm.
So it's an awesome plant. It's
Save me
vigorous.
one.
It's tough as nails. I'll
Save,
save you one. I mean,
save me one. I need all these things at my place in East Texas, man. And it all starts, Rob, with having water, and I'm finally there. Almost there.
my water bill for my nursery out there and my roses is sometimes up to $200 a month in the summertime. So if you got a lot of stuff to water, it's not going to be cheap.
That's
But
okay.
it's cheaper than putting down a water well. Um, my neighbor put in a water well and it was like $15,000.
Yeah, I got quoted for one and it was like 23, and it's about 9 to 10 months of waiting if you can find someone to come to your house and drill a well. So that's
And
another.
the
Hmm?
and the wells out there in East Texas can hit ironstone and give you irony water and turn everything orange.
Yeah,
It won't hurt the plants, but the plants look terrible. It
yeah.
don't hurt them. But here the wells are shallow. The aquifer at this time is still good, though I don't know how for how long. But you can drill a 80-foot well and hit good water here in this part of Louisiana. But I don't know for how long. But it's pretty. It's our wells here are pretty shallow. But but yeah, you grow any of these improved chicken plum, Chickasaw plums? Do you grow these improved Chickasaws?
I don't, but I've heard.
You need to try to find some. I'm gonna have some of them available. I have Miss Bessie. I can save you some suckers to Miss Bessie. That'd be a good plum to add to your property. You mix it with the wild Chickasaw plum. Miss Bessie gives you these big pale yellowish greenish plums with big pink blushes, and they sucker everywhere, and you can have hundreds of trees, and they require no care once they get established.
I
No
like that.
spraying, no watering, no anything. You just, as the old trees get old, you cut them down and let the suckers take over from the old trees. They're clonal. So once a big tree gets old, starts getting decrepit, you just chainsaw it down and the new sprouts come up and you'll save you some new sprouts coming up and just cut the old one down and train the new sprouts up. It runs like a beast, but it's a good plum. I used to, my aunt used to grow it. We came from a lady named Miss Bessie Crow, so we just call it Miss Bessie plum. And
I love
I
it.
have a I have a really nice apple from her too. I rooted. It's a it's a very tart apple that does well in the South, and it makes wonderful cooked apple. It's a very good cooking apple. She used to make me apple butter for. She was like in her 80s, and I was like in my like about 12, 13 years old. She'd always be bringing me apple butter to the house, and I liked her apple butter. It was really good. And if you want to grow any kind of southern apples, look into Mr. Larry Stevenson. That's another guy that'd be awesome for the podcast. He talks about he's an expert on southern adapted apples and pears and mulberries. And he has a huge collection of southern apples that will actually make in the South. The ones they sell at Walmart and Lowe's and Home Depot, you don't want to buy them unless it's Molly's Delicious or Einsheimer or Dorset Gold. It's the only ones you want to buy if you see them for sale. They'll make here, but the rest of them, yeah, they won't make here.
Yeah.
It's too hot. Not enough chill hours.
Yeah.
And some roses are like that too. Some of the more northern roses, like Portlands and centifolias and moss roses, they bloom poorly here because it doesn't get cold enough for them. They got apples and stuff. They had chill hours. And have
So
you heard the story? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, Teddy, we're like way over our time, and I want to have you back, Rob. So we can't do everything all in one day because I have so many rat holes that I want to go down. We didn't like you start talking about plums and apples and everything else. I have a lot of questions, so we're not gonna we can't do it all today because I have to have you back. Teddy, is there anything that you need to ask? Because I know I have a lot more, but
No, I'm blown away. I'm tapped out for today because I mean I could ask 30 more questions and this would go for 3 more hours. I just I'll just say this. I just have a comment. I feel like I'm above average when it comes to your typical person, like just intelligence wise and definitely plant wise because I'm into it and I grow plants and garden and have a nursery. But my God, I feel insignificant here sitting with you, Rob. You've got a wealth of knowledge, and I don't know how you have this much. Like you're rattling off names that I don't know. I don't. It seems like you have a screen in front of you, like that's prompting you with all this. I'm stunned. I What a Sunday. I'm impressed. Thank you so much for being on. My God.
It was a pleasure. I love to talk. So if you set me up for another podcast, we could talk about like fruit trees of the South and
Yeah.
or more on the roses or just anything. I love to talk gardening. I can talk about anything except lawns, ferns, and houseplants.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I'll echo Teddy. I feel like I'm also probably above average, but I will say I really like your spirit of a preserving history. I like the heirloom aspect of it as well. I'm a real big fan of not just bulldozing over all these things that have been here for a long time just because we think we know better, because oftentimes, not oftentimes, most of the time we don't know better. And there's a lot of things that the old timers have had done that I unfortunately will never have the opportunity to probably ever experience or do. But I think I can relive some of that with some of these heirloom varieties. So I'm excited, and I love hearing your stories, man. Like, can you imagine going to like a drug dealer's house to go get a cutting of a rose? That is
I did that. My friend was looking at me. He was another C. He was looking at me in utter horror. He was horrified. But I wanted that rose, and and when you want something bad enough in the plant world, you better get it because it may not be there next time you drive by.
That's
exactly.
true. That's
That's
true.
That's the next level stuff, Rob. So, look, I appreciate the last, I don't know, I don't even know how long it's been. I have no idea.
It's been a blast.
So I appreciate the time. Teddy, do you have anything else?
No, just I what a Sunday. I'm utterly impressed and selfishly I love doing this podcast for interviews just like this. This was great, Rob. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Thank you, sir. So,
Y'all,
everybody, episode 21 of the Palmcast, Rob McElwee. Thank you, Rob. This was fantastic. You already agreed to come on again, so we'll have to figure
yes,
out how we do
anytime.
that. Awesome. Thanks,
Just
everybody.
you have a good one.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.